For a show that's gone on for a very long time and a show that's also very expansive, it is no surprise that Ninjago has a lot of foreshadowing. And it's a fantastic thing because typically speaking the writers are very good at what they do, and I have to be honest, it is no surprise that they can do this because they're typically at least a season ahead. There are definitely instances where they may be 2 or maybe even more if they have a specific idea in mind, but they definitely know what they're going to be doing in the near future when it comes to the show, and they typically do like to tease that fact. And whether they are intentional with it or not, they definitely do a lot of foreshadowing, and I absolutely love it. Sometimes they foreshadow within its season itself, maybe the season before they do it. Sometimes they are multiple seasons ahead, and those may be unintentional, and you'll see what I mean in a minute, but the fact is that it is all definitely there, and rewatching the show in hindsight certainly makes things very interesting. So that's what I want to talk about today, because Ninjago Foreshadowing is absolutely stellar. So let me not waste any more of your time, and let's see when Ninjago foreshadowed itself. Now, there are some instances of foreshadowing that is very much on the nose and it gets acknowledged in the show itself, and that in my opinion is mainly Jay's eye patch. But the fact is that I don't really want to talk about those too much because I want to give more attention to some of the more interesting ones that we do get to see. Let's start off with some ones that are potentially within the season itself or from the season before. The first one that I do particularly like, and I never realized until I made this video, is actually the instance in Skybound where Lloyd foreshadows how they're going to escape Cryptarium. In the 3rd episode of Skybound Encrypted, we get to see the ninja break out into a fight and they attempt to figure out what they're going to do about Narukon through Soto. But of course Soto remarks that he wants his freedom in exchange for the information, and the ninja in general also want to escape, so that's where they begin to concoct their own plan. Once their fight ends and the guards retake control of all of the prisoners, we see all the ninja walking off to go to solitary. But when the ninja are walking off and they're remarking about the fact that they're going to have to bust out, we actually spot a little detail with Lloyd. And that small detail is actually a fork, which is the thing we see Lloyd use to actually uncuff the ninja. And usually speaking, you may wonder how did he end up with that utensil, but the fact is that in a couple scenes beforehand, when the ninja are walking off, we actually see Lloyd with that very utensil. And we see it stash it in his pocket, and that of course leads to the fact that of course Lloyd had that plan ahead of time, and he knew that was going to be how they ended up doing it. And honestly, I never noticed that small fact, and it's honestly very subtle, to be perfectly honest with you. As someone who's rewatched Skybound multiple times, I never noticed that until now. So the fact is that they actually showed how the ninja were going to escape well before they actually did it, and I really like that. The next within season one that I also found interesting was actually from Hunted, and it's from one of the very first shots of the season itself, where Dareth is sneaking around to get the ninja food. We actually see him obviously get stopped by the Sons of Garmadon, and eventually he ends up with no food, which is very Dareth of him. But when he's walking along the streets to get back to the ninja team, in one of the very first shots, for literally just a couple of frames, we actually see another person in frame, and that is none other than Skylar. And of course, we realize later down the line that the Elemental Masters were in fact watching the ninja and waiting for the right time. And this shows that they were actually observing the ninja. And honestly, if you picked up on that fact, it's a very good bit of foreshadowing to figure out where the resistance was going from that point. And again, I love that small detail. It's something very not noticeable because it's literally only there for a couple of frames. And the fact is that small bit alone does set up the fact that Skylar at the very least was confirmed to be in the new season. So if you picked it up at the time, you would have known that Skylar was going to be doing something. And honestly, I think it's a very interesting bit that foreshadows what was going to happen. And those are just examples from within seasons. Sometimes you get a season getting foreshadowed by the season that came beforehand. I mean, one of the first examples to give is definitely the fact that season 5, where Cole becomes a ghost, was actually foreshadowed the season before. In season 4, we get to see an interaction between Cole and an Anachondrite cultist, and when Cole was up to no good, he actually remarks to the cultist that it looks like that they have seen a ghost, of course referring to himself. And honestly, I think that's a very interesting detail to pick up on. Because we know for a fact that Season 4 was foreshadowing Season 5, I mean, the end of the season literally showed off Morrow. The fact is that this season was very much teeing up the idea of ghosts and the whole concept of them in general. So this honestly is a very, very good one and very subtle. It's a one-off line that you would never really think of until you realize that Cole does become a ghost later on. But another instance of just a one-off line foreshadowing the next season is literally with Season 11 and Season 12. We get to see in Season 11, Jay remark to Crag about the game Lava Zombies, and he mentions that the game was created by Milton Dyer, who at this point was not introduced to us within the show. But the fact is that in the next season, of course, we are fully introduced to Milton Dyer and the game of Prime Empire. And this goes to show that one simple one-off line can seriously foreshadow the next season of the show, and it really does imply the idea that at any point in the new seasons of Ninjago, for example with Dragon's Rising, they may be teasing us the show without us even realizing. Because why else would the name Milton Dyer be brought up in this season unless it was to set up the next season? I think it's really interesting that Jay did it, especially considering the significance of Jay's role in that next season. So honestly, Milton Dyer being brought up is really fascinating, and I love it so much. I mean, even then, a more long-form bit of foreshadowing, including just saying a name, of course, Season 11 gives us clutch powers. And in Season 1 of the show, Cole mentions clutch powers. Like, there's no way that they were intending on this being so far down the line, but the fact is that in retrospect, it shows that within the first season of the show, clutch powers is confirmed to be around, and the fact that he is then introduced to us 10 seasons later is incredible to see. But that brings up an interesting point: long-term foreshadowing, when the show may say something in the first few seasons, and then it gets brought up way later down the line. I love that instance, and there's definitely a couple of them. The first one that I would like to bring up is the curious case of Morrow and Kai. Of course, we do understand that Morrow and Kai were definitely on the same direction when it came to how they were personally growing. The belief of being the Green Ninja definitely does send you to a very dark place. Of course, the main difference being is that Kai actually does end up accepting the fact that he is not the Green Ninja, and through that, he realizes that his ultimate objective is to actually protect the Green Ninja, and it leads him to become the Fire Master that we all know and love. However, when we were introduced to Morrow in Season 5, we do note the fact that he also had that exact same belief as Kai. He believed that he was the Green Ninja, and nothing was going to stop him from proving that fact. He never had something that drove him to realize that he wasn't the Green Ninja until very on later down the line where he redeemed himself. But the fact is that he continued on to the very bitter end believing that he was in fact the prophesied Green Savior. And honestly, it does serve as a very unintentional way of foreshadowing the direction that Kai could have gone in. And I mean, Season 4 even technically touches on that, re-showing that Kai still has that anger within, and I do think that ultimately is technically still a foreshadowing of Morrow. Because you could actually say that Kai and Morrow foreshadow each other. You could say that Kai's anger in Season 4 is a way of representing how Morrow was going to be in the next season, and then you could also say just showing us the character of Morrow and his firm belief that he should have been the Green Ninja is a foreshadow of what Kai could have been if he never had that realization. And honestly, it does kind of show that Morrow and Kai in a lot of ways are honestly the same character who simply just chose different paths in life. And I mean, even when Morrow redeems himself in Season 3 Part 1, you actually get to see Morrow in a very different light. And honestly, he does still remind me of Kai in a lot of ways. And I do think above all else, that is the point I want to bring, and that's the fact that Morrow and Kai, in a lot of ways, are starting in the exact same point in life, but it shows how the difference of one decision can truly change the output on yourself in that life. I mean, I talked about this in the same way with Aaron and Sora in a previous video. If you haven't seen it, definitely do. But like I said in that one, it shows how one small decision can certainly alter the path of someone, and it can lead to very different consequences depending on which way you went on that decision. And in the case of Morrow and Kai, it definitely shows how the belief of being the Green Ninja and whether or not you can shake that and overcome it definitely leads to a different outcome. And that's where I'm left to my last one, and that is the curious case of Wojira, because even though she was introduced to us in Seabound, she has been hyped up essentially over the course of a lot of years. Now, I don't think this was intentional, because the first mention of Wojira, we had completely different writers, so I don't think this was intentional, but the fact is that in hindsight, when you rewatch the show, you notice that Wojira is not the first time it was brought up. The first time we actually get Wojira is in Season 8 of the show, between a conversation of Nya and Jay, and they remark about who Gojira is and what the serpent actually was. And I think it's interesting to note that she was mentioned that far back when it came to the show's timeline. And then furthermore, she was brought up in season 11 in the Netherrealm. I mean, she had a whole canyon dedicated to the name of Gojira, and Lloyd even invokes the power of Gojira when he's in there to collapse everything on top of the enemies. And honestly, having her mentioned twice before she was actually really brought into the plot in the island, I think is very fascinating to see. And it shows how one singular line or setup can truly impact the show later on, because of course Gojira has a big impact on the timeline of Ninjago. So the fact that you could watch Seabound and then go back to that season and hear about it again is really fascinating to honestly see, and it may have even have served as the inspiration for Gojira much later on. Of course, we will never know the answer to that. Maybe one day Doc would say it, but as of now, all we know is that Gojira has been a concept in Ninjago for a very long time, and when you rewatch the show, it is definitely fun to see it in that perspective. But those are some of the foreshadowing instances of Ninjago, and I honestly think all of them are very fascinating, because as I've shown, there are very different types of foreshadowing that you get to see. Like I said, within the same season, maybe one season before or after, or maybe it spans over the entirety of the show itself. It is absolutely fantastic and absolutely stellar, and serves as one of the more reasons that I absolutely love Ninjago. But what do you think of the foreshadows? Is there a particular favourite of yours? Is there one that I haven't mentioned? If there are more foreshadows that you want me to talk about, I will definitely do a follow-up if you want to see it. But like I said, it's just another reason to absolutely love this show and appreciate the writing of it. Because obviously there are issues with the show in of itself, I'm not going to deny that. Of course, these instances truly make me love the show, and it's honestly the reason why I love it so much. But that is about it for today, you guys, and thank you very much for watching. Take care. Okay, bye!